Welcome to PRAJNA Sparks. In this episode, we conclude our series, Why Nirvana Matters, where Yeshe and Zopa talk to contemporary teachers about nirvana, peace, and its relevance in our lives and practice of Dharma. We're grateful to you for sharing and reviewing our podcast as often as you can.
Welcome to PRAJNA Sparks. We're so delighted to be here today with our dear Dharma friends Rinsen and Doan, talking about why Nirvana matters. As we're getting started, Rinsen and Doan, would you mind saying a couple words about who you are, what you do?
Absolutely. Before we do, I just want to say how nice it is to connect in this way. I have to say, as a married couple that teaches, connecting with another married couple that teaches the Dharma, it's just, I really appreciate your companionship and your efforts in the Dharma. So thank you for having us here. I guess I'd say, we're firmly planted in the Zen tradition. My transmitting teacher is James Myoen Ford Roshi. And so that situates us within the Soto line of G.U. Kennett, and also with the Rinzai Koan line from Aitken Roshi and Harada Yasutani Koan curriculum, for those who care about those kinds of things. And so that's a mainstay of where we come from and how we work with students. We also have transmission of the Gelugpa Lam Rim teachings from Gelik Rinpoche. So that has made a huge influence on us. Yeah, and so I'm the abbot, and Doan Sensei is the teacher as well at the Buddhist Temple of Toledo, a very family-oriented training temple here in Toledo, Ohio, and we're just delighted to be here. Doan, you want to say something?
Yeah, all the things you said, and we also do a White Tara sadhana with the Sangha here as well. Mm-hmm. So we also have that from Rinpoche. Definitely the emphasis is on families here. And at the same time, somehow, cross our fingers, knock on wood, we've basically been able to combine that with some fairly rigorous Zen training. On the face of it, it seems like, well, how can you do both of those things if you're just having like a Sunday service where everybody and their brother can come? But it's working.
It is.
Fabulous. I'd love to start out by just getting a sense of what nirvana is in the context of your Dharma practice and teaching.
I would say, in the Zen tradition, everything winds around awakening is the word we typically use. Enlightenment, awakening, satori, nirvana. It has to do with realizing one's true nature, realizing the Buddha nature, and getting that so that it's realized and it's actualized and functioning, and that people actually live out of their true nature once they've realized it. In Zen training, everything has to do with seeing that nature of the self, and then once it's been seen, learning how to integrate that and live out of that, responding to circumstances as they arise. So the primary way that we do that is we begin with all students, pretty universally, I'd say, focusing on counting the breath and putting the awareness in the hara and the one point. Zen is a very physically embodied practice. And so that initial chunk of time spent getting connected to the body connected to itself, getting samadhi developed enough in a way that moves from the cushion into daily life so that becomes palpable and stable enough. Then that enables us to move into koan study. And koan study is where we really work very deeply with students with their encounter with this true nature and integrating it, using these encounters from the tradition and lineage we come from. All of it's really based in the Bodhi mind, bodhicitta, the mind of coming to awakening for the benefit of all beings. And so the moral and ethical guidelines and the paramitas are really central to that. We don't go into the wisdom teachings with a student until the moral and ethical base has been established, refuge has been taken. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I think really Zen practice is just sort of like the verification of the Heart Sutra. I've been classically trained that nirvana is peace, and that this nirvana is not separate from samsara. And nirvana is samsara, samsara is nirvana. So what we're doing is we're working with people to try to help them to really integrate, as Roshi was saying, the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of the self. All of the koan system is essentially working with that integration. And then because people need that cognitive framework, we really do require that, especially if someone's going to be like a formal student, that they go through the Lamrim teachings. And we actually have them do like a really super short, like 3 principles of the path kind of Lamrim every day with a daily home liturgy. So that's kind of what's going on there.
Yeah, we find that, actually it's kind of an interesting feature in Zen tradition, particularly because it was arguably one of the earlier traditions to come to North America, in the wake of the Second War and connecting with Japanese culture and all of this. And there was a big emphasis on the initial Zen masters that came over to America to really push Kensho and awakening and seeing into the nature of the self, the wisdom teachings. It's taken time for the fullness of the tradition to gradually become noted and seen and recognized. And so, having a good Mahayana Buddhist basic framework is absolutely essential to the process. There are many examples of people that perhaps had a shallow or a deep Kensho or an insight into the nature of the self, but without that core kind of cognitive framework as a grounding, it doesn't stick and it doesn't work so well, honestly. So that's an important feature of realizing and practicing nirvana is having some cognitive framework to help situate all this stuff.
And the other thing is, folks, because we work so much with Sangha and community, they really get like this hands-on pretty much whenever they're at the temple. Oh, this nirvana is communal. This nirvana is all of us together. And each of us is so unique, yet we're all practicing nirvana together. And that's like so important. Like we do this eye-opening ceremony for people's Buddhas from their home altars. And the thing that's always so kind of like, wow, is that everyone's Buddha is different, right?
She's talking about we put a strong emphasis on family and households and householders having an altar at home, like a classic, nice Buddhist altar. It's a technology of awakening, really, if it's used well. And one of the features we have is this so-called eye-opening ceremony where the image has its third eye opened and the Buddha is invited to reside in the image. And this is important. It's actually included in the transmission documents, which is basically in the Soto sect. It's a huge spell book, basically. It's a bunch of Buddhist magic, which is great. And that's one of them. And typically it's a thing that's done kind of in secret or, there's a ceremony, but only the person doing the ritual actually knows what's happening in any exquisite way. And one of the things that Doan and I do a lot, Doan Sensei and I do a lot, is take those kinds of things and make them public, make them accessible to everybody. And so we had the idea to let everybody bring their Buddha image from home, and so the kids will come and bring the altar from their family altar. And as their eyes become awakened, we connect them with the main image at the temple, which is connected to the lineage and the ancestors. And then you end up with this beautiful kind of potpourri of all these different Buddha images up there on the altar. And
that's great.
Yeah, each one represents a family. And I think nirvana is something like that, all of us being the Buddhas of our own mandalas, the essential nature expressed exquisitely, uniquely, and meeting circumstances as they rise.
That's just so beautiful. I love how you're describing the importance of nirvana as a communal practice and that, or as like that Mahayana grounding, right? Of we're all in it together, that nirvana is going to include all of us together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was, again, in the Zen tradition, and again, you got to give these early adapters just a ton of breathing room because you can't even speak the language and say, hi, my name is, and where's the bathroom and that kind of stuff. How the hell are you going to communicate the Buddha Dharma? I mean, it's a lift, as you all appreciate, But yeah, it's not just the lone person off in the cave as Bodhidharma coming to awakening on their own. It certainly has to have that quality. That moment needs to occur, and no one can do this for us. And yet we cannot do it alone. And it's not just about the student and the teacher. It's about the student, the teachers, and the Sangha. And these three are inseparable from the realization and manifestation of nirvana. This is not a solo self-improvement project that you can just do in isolation. You need to get connected to the lineage, authentic lineage holding folks in whom the lineage is alive and awake in them, eyes clearly open that we're still humans, right? Critical thinking is still engaged. Ethical and moral guidelines need to be adhered to and held up. But it also comes to this business of Sangha, being in community. And this is one of the things that I have a lot of concern about when I cast at what I perceive to be the way the Dharma is kind of happening in the West, is that there's a lot of classes and workshops and seminars that are more like kind of like a continuing education credit model or something where people who don't know each other go, they take a class and they leave, or they go and do a retreat and they leave, which can be very powerful. I'm not down on that at all, but I'm concerned that the jewel of Sangha is not going to flourish there, because you have to be willing to rub elbows with people over time and to be vulnerable to them and to be seen by them and to be willing to see them in accordance with the lineage. And there's a lot of magic that happens in those interactions. I stress that it's over time. You can't skip stages. You can't have a decade's worth of experience in a weekend, no matter how intelligent the weekend is. It has to do with living together, in my view. And that's what is required. And that's difficult. It's a lot more difficult than just running a class.
I would say, that we put a lot of emphasis on people sort of sharing where they're at any particular time. So there's something we do called open sozan, where after retreat, everybody goes around and shares their experience, not too long, but they do share. Sometimes we have to ding them out.
Yeah, there's a timer.
And, for the students who are formal students, they all get together. Everybody takes a turn sharing their spiritual autobiography. There's always tons of check-ins and tons of sharing. And people, how do I say this? Like, some people are like petrified of that, right? And
some people like it a little too much.
Too much, yeah. But what ends up happening over time is this beautiful sort of like container where, the people who like hang back get to feel like what it's like to step forward. The people that are stepping forward too much, it's pretty clear they need to step back, and what that feels like, not separate from their Dharma practice. It's a big focus of the way that we're teaching is like, this moment is a moment of nirvana, right exactly where you are. How is that true?
Well, it's interesting too, as I'm hearing you frame that, because that is definitely there, but there's also the student-teacher relationship and the sense of lineage and being in a covenanted relationship where guidance can be offered.
Right.
That's such an important thing. Like, it's, when we have a deep karmic bond with students that go through the various processes that we have of taking refuge and becoming formal students and all this, it creates a very clear student-teacher relationship. And it creates a very clear access to the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma. And it also creates a very clear peer relationship among Sangha members. And there are levels of experience that are recognized. When their eye starts to open some, then there's empowerments that come and they begin to participate. So it's vertical, but it's also communal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a tricky thing. I mean, a lot of communities it's just way too damn hierarchical for their own good, or then they flip and they get so egalitarian that no one can correct anyone. Everybody's right all the time about everything. And it's like, well, that doesn't really cut it either. Definitely not in Zen training.
But I think that verticality comes from a lot of the like one-to-one work that we do with students. And basically what we're doing is we're holding up the truth of nirvana to them constantly. We're always holding up their Buddha nature. And I think there's just this very natural kind of respect. And
it might be interesting for people that don't know what you're talking about to actually describe what Doksan is, because that is an interesting feature of Zen training. It's integral to Zen training. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go for that?
You should do it, I think.
Well,
I just know how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's compelling me to highlight it. I mean, it's the thing about like realizing nirvana, okay, is it's very easy to have a glimpse and have it covered up and be unrecognized. It's very easy to have some encounter that is shallow and perceive it to be deep. It's also very easy for a practitioner to like start making a nest, thinking that they've achieved the end of all things when clearly there's more work to be done. And none of this is accessible in our tradition, at least through big public discourses and group classes and lectures. It requires face-to-face interaction in the belly of deep retreat. So the retreat format is called sesshin, which means touching the heart-mind. And one of the primary features is that the student has a full, robust day of meditation, zazen, we call it, practice.
Liturgy.
Yeah, liturgy. There's all kinds of stuff. But really, it comes down to they come in front of the teacher in a private room with the two of us. There's a jori, bell. And, when a student is advanced enough, they have a koan that they're working on. And there's a direct kind of clashing of swords or a direct full contact meeting, or there's a heart-to-heart connection. And in the initial phases, it's very biographical and it's like, getting to know you kind of stuff. But as soon as that can be done, please let's be done with that, because that's not the point. The point really is this kensho and not getting stuck in it. And so some of the most transformative moments and deeply powerful moments come when a student has had some experience. They present this experience or the results of it or the echo of it, and then it can be affirmed. You see, then you've got a teacher that can go, yeah, you're on the right track. That is what it smells like. That's how it feels. That's what it tastes like. But notice here. Keep going. Don't be satisfied with this, or like, no, that is completely not the case. You don't want to just be, for example, sitting there in a blackout thinking you're doing it. That's not it. That's where when Doan Sensei is talking about that direct connection with the teacher, I think that's integral to the process that we do.
Yeah, that's so crucial. Also in Tibetan lineage, I mean, it is very much that sense of the teacher-student relationship and the ability to guide, just like you're saying, that there is an importance of hierarchy of an established relationship so that we know where to turn for trust and guidance.
Yeah. And this, this is the other fields of my life that I have any depth in, which is jazz music and Aikido. It's the same thing there. I mean, it's like I got a chance to play a lot of concerts with a vocalist named John Hendricks, who played with Charlie Parker and Duke Ellington and like everybody else and their brother. And he's an amazing elder statesman in the tradition. And so when I get a chance to be on stage with him, I mean, he passed away a few years ago, but he's the sensei, man. Like whatever John wants the tempo to be, that's the tempo. And you just go, yes, sir. And you play. And if you can get John Hendricks to like snap his fingers and groove while you're playing, that's a kind of a transmission that happened there, Mm-hmm. If a young person were to get up there and be on stage with John or anybody of his stature and start making a fuss over things, they're not going to get it. Now, once you've received, then, okay, it's your band, and what are you going to play? Mm-hmm. And that's integral to the spirit of Zen. Each Zen master has the mandate to take the awakening that they have and manifest it according to their time, circumstance, place, degree, the people they serve, the culture they're in looks different, but that heart of it is no different. Mm-hmm. See? And it's the same thing in martial arts, It's like there's a real obvious pecking order, and it's not random. It's very clear. And that's how you learn, though, that the sensei isn't there to just beat on you. It's there to help you gain experience wherein you can grow. So it's a growth hierarchy.
As you describe the process of practitioners, it sounds like it's important for practitioners to have some sense of awakening or nirvana from the get-go, and that might change over time. Can you speak to that?
What's occurring to me to say, and I want to hear what you have to say to that, Dawn, is that many people have either they come into the Sangha because they're in a shit ton of pain and they've tried other things and it fails, and somewhere along the line they encountered some Buddha Dharma and it resonates and they want to find what's going on. That's like a major pathway in. But there's other folks, sometimes the same folks, that have had some brush with the absolute, at least. Some encounter with emptiness or the Buddha nature at some moment in their near or distant past that left a massive impression on them. And they're trying to find what the hell was that? Or how do I deepen that? Or does anybody know what I'm talking about? Or am I crazy? It's not necessary for a student to have had a taste of nirvana or to be academically up to par on the subtleties of the Mahayana before they start, but they have to have proper motivation. They have to have a real, sincere motivation to gain entrance into the mandala. And that can come in different ways. It's either pain-based, dukkha, suffering-based, I guess I should say, or a natural affinity to Buddha nature itself. And whether that's just dumb luck, if that's past births, resurfacing and saying, hey, dude, let's pick it up again, or what have you, if it's just, who knows. But there has to be a strong motivation in there somewhere. And it can be a brush with something we might recognize as a kind of a kensho. But kensho it's not a binary thing. It's not like either you've had it or you haven't. Mm-hmm. There are levels and degrees and there are stages of this thing. And so what the problem can be is if someone's had an initial awakening, they're not in an environment where they can connect with a guide and they're on their own and they take this initial experience and they start to mentally make it something it wasn't. Mm. That can be very difficult. Those sometimes are the most challenging students because you have to unwind a lot of the story making that they've made in order to brush that stuff off so we can actually start doing the work again. Mm. So, Dawn, you had something you wanted to throw in there?
Well, I was just going to say, it's not always successful. We've had some people come and they can't hang. But I'm sort of thinking when somebody comes into the atmosphere of the mandala, and we definitely call the temple a mandala, it kind of doesn't matter what their conscious ideas are or even what their karmic trajectory has been up until that point, because we're constantly, everything in the temple is talking to and speaking and drawing forth their Buddha nature. So we don't really care what they think when they come in. Honestly, we don't. They're just sort of like a tea bag, right? They're going to absorb what they're going to absorb, and it's going to take the amount of time that it takes, and that they're in the door is plenty, is everything, basically.
Yeah, I would only add, as long as they can be there in a way that isn't a hindrance to others. As Dawn Sensei alluded to, there are times where this is not a fit and someone needs to leave. As painful as that call can be to make, it's absolutely one of the job descriptions of any Dharma teacher, as I would see them, is that if there's somebody engaging in the practice in a way that's caustic or toxic or unhealthy to the community itself, you have to have the gumption to call that out and make that clear. And that's one of the most unwelcome bits of the job of abbot. But I think that's important to the health of the Sangha. There's a lot of emphasis on ethical behavior by teachers, rightly so, and deeply needed. Many examples of past ill behavior that is unacceptable, totally the case. And also, that applies to every Sangha member. And there are examples in the Pali Canon of the Buddha, like having people bounced out on their ear because they weren't hanging correctly. And I think that's important. I think that in our attempt to be accommodating and inclusive, which we should do, if it goes too far, it can end up collapsing a community.
This has been just delightful. So I'd like to turn us back to actually, Rinsen, what you were saying right at the beginning, to bring it back because of this very unique circumstance of being Dharma teachers together, even as you're a family, even as you're married partners. Of course, I'm sure we could go on and talk about this a lot, but
It could be a whole episode in itself.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, sure.
we just might do that. but at least for a taste, like, how is it for both of you teaching together, living this Dharmic life together?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's absolutely a blast. I can't imagine how anybody could do this on their own. I know people do. God love them. I don't know. I mean, there's so many times when, there's some thing going on in the Sangha that I am not seeing that Doan Sensei has a deep clarity about, or vice versa. And, the kind of tensile strength that a successful marriage requires, right, is also kind of similar, if not the same, similar to, if you're going to teach with somebody in the Dharma, there's got to be a massive tensile strength there that allows people to completely be authentic without any concern or fear that that's not acceptable. And the other thing to say is that in our particular case, Dawn and I obviously we're very different people. I've got a lot of certain kind of quality and energy, and Dawn has a lot of different kind of qualities and energies. And I think it's ridiculously auspicious for those who study with us that they shouldn't be getting confused that Rinsen's personality is the Dharma, because it's not. That just happens to be how I express. But the thing is that when the students can actually interact with the both of us and they get very different expressions of that same heart of wisdom, then this is all to the benefit of them. They're far less likely to mistake personal charisma or personality quirks for what the teachings are. That's what I would say.
Sense, too, of like each of you as individuals, but also what the partnership brings to the teaching, right? What the partnership communicates.
Yeah. I mean, there's a real fidelity and a long-standing stability that can withhold whatever comes up. And that's required in the student-teacher relationship, too. It just is. We get into some really intense stuff. When people actually start confronting the roots of their suffering, it's not for the faint of heart. You know what I mean? And if you're going to really do the deep work, in my view, it has to be a relationship over time. That time thing is important. It's like getting an infant to be a toddler, to be a teenager. Time is involved. And the ability to be stably there, reliably so, kind of unshakably so, is necessary. And I think our marriage is like that, and our family life is like that, and it gives a kind of safety to the students who study with us. Dawn, what would you want to throw in there?
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know what to compare it to because I've never taught outside of the relationship. I'd probably be like an utter failure. I don't know. I'm really, really happy to be teaching with Rinsen. I mean, we do bring different things to the teaching. And I would say, interestingly enough, I'm the one that's oftentimes brings the newness to the Sangha in the teaching. And you're the one that like is really like the stability and the like organizational.
Yeah, we always say, I'm earth and water, and Dawn is fire and air. So you got the whole package here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to teach without Rinsen.
You could do it. It'd be tough, but you could totally do it. In that case, I mean, a thing to mention is that, when people become students, they become our students. It's not my students and her students. We don't do that. It's like we're the teachers, you're the students, we work together. Okay. And that's how this works. There are other models that, in the places where we trained, where they would have, students had to pick a particular teacher. It doesn't play out well. It certainly wouldn't work for us. Maybe it works elsewhere. I think maybe not. Maybe, I don't know. But for sure, in our community, it's like people study with us and we combust our lives on behalf of the students. And we have a good time doing it, by the way. We really enjoy teaching. We love and relish the Sangha life. And it's a delight and a privilege and a joy.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you can't even say where the temple life begins in our home life.
It's unending. There are no boundaries.
There are no boundaries.
Yeah, there are no barriers. Yeah.
Well, Roshi and Sensei, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your experience with our listeners. I'm sure they're going to really appreciate it.
And taking your time with us.
Oh, for sure. I'd like to invite anybody who cares to, if you enjoy what you're hearing on our end of the dial here, the Buddhist Temple of Toledo podcast has been around since 2007. It's very well received and respected. It basically has the talks that we give, the workshops and teachings and everything. They're there free at your favorite podcatcher. Buddhist Temple of Toledo podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you, Sensei.
Thank you both. Always nice to have an excuse to hang out with y'all.
May all beings benefit.
May they
so.
benefit, yes.
This is Yeshe and Zopa for PRAJNA Sparks. If you would like to learn more about Roshi, Sensei, and the Buddhist Temple of Toledo, please check the episode notes for links to their website and their podcast. Be sure to join us on the next full moon when we return to our regular podcast format. Shivnee is our Tibetan singing bowl artist. We can't thank you enough for taking the time to like, follow, share, and review PRAJNA Sparks. It means a lot to us. If you have any questions, contact us via email, Instagram, or Facebook. Check the episode notes for those links, and for more resources on today's topic, visit us on the web at prajnafire.com, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at PRAJNA Sparks, or YouTube at PRAJNA Fire. Thank you for listening. May all beings benefit.